Language. What is language? Language is a specific method of communication that can be used to share detailed information among individuals. The vast majority of languages use vocalizations and sounds that can be created by humans and can be represented by respective symbols symbolizing the sounds made. Some languages are made for those people or those situations in which there isn't any possibility to make any vocalizations, like sign language, which uses specific hand gestures, body motions and facial expressions to talk. For those who haven't watched my project, I'm now going to recap some definitions needed in this video. 0. Words and their definitions are arbitrary. You can understand other people just and only if you agree in using the same definitions for the same words. 1. An individual is a living being distinct from other living beings. One dog is an individual, one ant is an individual, one tree is an individual, and so on. Individual, here, is not used as a synonym of person. 2. By life form I mean a distinct group of individuals almost identical to each others. This means that all Homo sapiens are part of the same life form, but not all apes, because we have distinctions among each other that makes us different on a deeper level. To be almost identical doesn't mean to be a carbon copy of each other, but to share a blend of characteristics from one's life form, which means that even in distinct races of animals like ants, an individual is not only different from another, from a different race, but even from other members of the same colony, but the differences inside a race are characteristic of that life form, meaning that even if queens, warriors and workers ants are different from one another, they are still part of the same life form. 3. What I define as humans are just and only the only animals that everyone has called human for a long time up until now, Homo sapiens. Yes, in science Homo means human, but I'm not using strictly scientific language to make these videos, and, personally, saying human instead of Homo sapiens every time sounds better. 4. A person is an individual with a peculiar way of thinking, which basically is what we humans use to prepare meaningful dialogues with each others, and to meticulously plan over a long time in the future, capable of a complex internal monologue and capable to use language to communicate with other people. This means that to be a person you do not need to be part of Homo sapiens, and to be a Homo sapiens doesn't mean to be a person. Like in cases of severe developmental deformity, where the kid basically develops without a brain, or to have once been a person, in cases such as catastrophic head trauma which leave the individual alive. In short, one day there may be a dog person, or a plant person, or an alien person, or a fungi person, or, most probable of all, a metal person. More about this in the project. I'll leave a link with the timestamp in the description. You're free to watch it instead of getting in the comments section asking the same questions that others may have already asked. There is a reason why the project is long. Some of you may be skeptical in hearing me saying this, either being unable to shake the preconception that only humans can be people, or blind to the fact that every single individual that you ever met and thought to be a person is just a Turing test. With our current technology we have no way to properly identify which is a person and which is not. We can just make an informed guess. The only person that anyone can prove absolutely exists is oneself, and the only person that it can be proven to is, again, oneself. We don't have the innate ability to be able to prove everything, let alone 100% correctly, but science is a self-correcting tool, and is the one thing that makes us able to be as correct as possible in a given time. Definitions. Time is over, so the difference between any form of communication and language is that language is used to share specific informations, while body language, animal noises, pointing at things, visual cues, like chameleons changing color, odors, hormones, pheromones, stink, what have you, and some more are much more vague. Even in the case of those animals that have different calls to alert about different kinds of predators, it's still not truly language. Language needed to evolve with us, because we are life forms that came to be by generating from simple nutrients in nature, without any input from any intelligence, at least as far as we have discovered. Because of that, other life forms that are not Homo sapiens may have just some aspects of language, or even the complete package, which means that they are able to communicate with us, with or without true language, although limited in their ability to do so, because of their life form's limitations. In the past, other members of the Homo family were not yet extinct. We can be more than sure when we say that at least some of them use some sort of language, but we cannot talk with the dead, and there has been nothing written for the majority of the timeline of Homo evolution. We can just speculate about their relative language abilities by studying their technologies. In fact, it seems that language evolved specifically as a need for technological evolution, and for better coordination within groups, not forgetting about its role as social glue. More about this in the description below. Quick reminder, evolution has no goal, it's not sentient. What ends up surviving was just capable enough to produce more offspring than the amount of individuals that died in a certain environment through time. As we follow the Homo evolutionary tree through the fossils that we uncover, we can see that the more dexterous the individuals became, the more complex and refined the tools produced were. Among anthropologists, it's thought that language evolved to make individuals able to teach the techniques needed to make such tools to the new generations. With time, the tools became more complex alongside the linguistic abilities of these animals. Up to now, there is no way to say with certainty when some of our ancestors became people, but at some point it happened, and after countless millennia, here we are. I dare to say that you, within high probability, are a human person both, because you fit the definition of human and person. You may be asking, why other animals like chimps are not people? After all, everybody knows about the talking monkeys. About that, there is no other living ape that is a person and that is able to truly use language. What those monkeys managed to do was to communicate using a human-taught codex instead than their natural ones. More about this in the description below. These monkeys not only could not use any language, but lacked the peculiar way of thinking too. We humans just evolved differently from them. We are the only people that exist up to this point. Now that I have framed the argument, I can come back to language itself. Language, as already said, is a method of communication that lets you share complex and accurate informations among minds with other people. Words and their definitions are arbitrary. You can understand other people just and only if you agree in using the same definitions for the same words. We humans invented a lot of words before truly understanding the world in which we live. An example is the fact that what we call trees do not have a tree common ancestor, but rather are different lineages that evolved convergently, because the structure was favorable to their environment. More about this in the description below. This means that words do not correctly represent reality, they are concepts, even approximations. A word can represent something that exists, like a chestnut can represent a group made of things with some common characteristics, like trees, or can just describe something that doesn't yet or can't exist, like a tree with fluorescent leaves or that moving tree in Harry Potter. Words do not simply represent reality. Language is not simply a data sharing software, but it's a way to express ourselves. People have difficulties describing what is art, without understanding that the definition is subjective and ever shifting. Everything can be art, even language. With language we are able to describe what no eye will ever be able to see in a lifetime, like alien worlds, or what is fantastical and cannot exist, like tales of dragons and gods. Language cannot be discovered under a rock, or distilled from a solution. It can only be invented to talk with other individuals. This is valid for another thing that we humans, and that some other life forms use too: math. What is math? Math is a system that can be used to make predictions about the world, if given enough correct data to work with. In math you use numbers, symbols, formulas and so on to simulate aspects of reality and even abstractions that can help one in their work. What are numbers if not concepts? You can find 5 of something, but you will never be able to find the 5, because it doesn't exist as an object. Same with 0 and infinity. Math can be used to represent reality, but just up to a point. You see, there is a problem with infinity. When talking about it just in the field of math, you cannot prove it exists. To prove that infinity exists, either in the sense that there is an infinite amount of x, or that x is composed of parts that are made of smaller and smaller and smaller ones to infinity, you would need infinite time, and we aren't even sure that that is possible to have. Even if you were an entity born with such knowledge, you would still need to prove it like anybody else, meaning that you can't. Even if you give up after you tried to search for infinity, you can never be sure if you just stopped short of a finite amount, or if the amount was truly infinite. What does it mean? It means either that 1. If infinity doesn't exist, or is the kind that has a smallest unit, but an infinite number, then numbers like pi are either finite or just approximations that have a really minuscule margin of error in out calculations, and that numbers like the result of 10 divided by 3 cannot give as a result a periodic number in real life, giving instead results like, if we were to use the smallest existing units as groups to divide. 10 divided by 3 equals 3 plus 3 plus 4. 2. If the kind of infinity that goes forever in the infinitely small and infinitely large exists, then numbers like pi can be truly infinite and periodic numbers exist in real life. Now I'm gonna cut off the infinity talk, because it could go on for infinity, and it gets even worse if we were to talk about infinity outside of math. So, math is a language. Math cannot be discovered under a rock, or distilled from a solution. It can only be invented to describe how the world works, but as a language it can also have its inaccuracies in doing so. We can see a lot of life forms using math. To use math you need a calculator, and, lo and behold, neuron circuits can make 4 great calculators, if arranged properly. Animals like bees are able to use math to accurately tell the other bees where a good batch of flowers is located relative to the hive, giving exact direction and distance, plus relative importance. More about this in the description below. With this I'm not saying that you can exterminate an hive of bees by forcing them to divide by 0, but I'm saying that both humans and bees can use math, and that we humans are able to know that they can, not because they told us so at the bar, but because we're able to describe their behavior with our way of doing math. With this we were able to observe that a silly dance that may be done in a hive is, in truth, the sharing of detailed informations among individuals. It's crazy to see that math, after all, truly is a universal language, even if the way that it's created and used varies among cultures. More about this in the description below. Math itself can be used in a spectrum among living beings, and most of the times it's not even used to communicate, but just to make personal predictions for the individual solitary animal, like felines calculating the best way to bounce their prey. Now you know what language is, how it came to be, and the fact that math is a kind of language. I'm bad at writing scripts. I don't know how to end this video. Bye.